Emily Reed sighed as she sorted through another box of donated items at the Boston Historical Society. After 5 years as the Society's chief archivist, she had developed a sixth sense for valuable finds among the endless stream of family heirlooms and forgotten treasures. Rain tapped against the windows of the cramped basement office, creating a rhythmic backdrop to her work. "What do we have here?" she murmured, carefully lifting a small wooden frame from beneath layers of yellowed newspaper. The daguerreotype inside showed a young girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, posed in an ornate chair. The child wore a pristine white dress with intricate lace details, her hair neatly arranged with a ribbon. Her expression was eerily serene, hands folded in her lap. Emily's breath caught as she noticed the unnatural stillness in the child's eyes. Having studied 19th century photography extensively, she recognized the telltale signs of a post-mortem portrait. Photographs taken after death, a common Victorian practice to memorialize loved ones. "Dr. Harlow will want to see this," Emily said, carefully placing the photograph on her desk. She reached for the donation form, searching for information about its origin. The donor, a 93-year-old woman named Clara Wilson, had left only a phone number and the cryptic note. She deserves to have her story told. Emily felt a connection to the solemn child in the photograph. Something about the careful positioning, the elaborate setting, and a barely perceptible detail at the edge of the frame suggested this was no ordinary memento mori. Little did she know, this discovery would lead her through a journey into America's past and reveal a heartbreaking story of love, sacrifice, and a family's desperate attempt to preserve a fleeting moment. Dr. Robert Harlow adjusted his glasses, leaning closer to the daguerreotype under the specialized light in the conservation lab. Emily watched as the 62-year-old historian's expression shifted from professional curiosity to stunned recognition. "This is extraordinary," he whispered, pointing to the lower corner of the photograph. "Do you see that?" Using a digital magnifier, he highlighted a small object partially obscured by the elaborate chair, a child's wooden toy horse, positioned as if intentionally included. "That's not typical for post-mortem photography," Emily observed. "Usually they removed personal items to create a more peaceful image." "Exactly," Dr. Harlow nodded. "And look at how the girl is posed. Most memorial photographs from this period showed the deceased as if sleeping. This child is seated upright, positioned to appear alive." Rain continued to drum against the windows as they examined other unusual aspects. The expensive quality of the daguerreotype itself, the elaborate studio setting uncommon for middle-class families of the 1880s, and most curiously, a small envelope taped to the back of the frame they hadn't initially noticed. Emily carefully removed the brittle, yellowed envelope. Inside was a folded scrap of paper with faded handwriting. "My dearest Alice, forgive me. May you find her again." The note was signed simply T with the date May 18th, 1884. "We need to speak with the donor," Dr. Harlow said, his voice carrying the weight of professional urgency. "This isn't just a memorial photograph. There's something else here, a story that's been hidden for almost a century and a half." Emily nodded, already reaching for her phone. The mystery of the little girl named Alice and the cryptic message had captured her completely. What tragedy had befallen this child, and why had someone gone to such lengths to create this elaborate final portrait? The retirement home where Clara Wilson resided was bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the somber nature of their visit. At 93, Clara's physical frame had grown fragile, but her sharp blue eyes revealed a mind still fully alert. She sat in her armchair by the window, surrounded by framed family photographs spanning generations. "I've been waiting for someone to call," Clara said, her voice surprisingly strong. "When I donated that photograph, I knew it would find the right person eventually." Emily placed the daguerreotype carefully on the table between them. "Mrs. Wilson, we found this note hidden in the frame. Can you tell us who Alice was?" Clara's weathered hands trembled slightly as she touched the frame. Alice wasn't her real name. It was Elizabeth Thornton. She was my grandmother's cousin, born in 1877 in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dr. Harlow leaned forward. "Well, the photograph appears to be a post-mortem portrait, but there are unusual elements that don't fit the typical memorial photography of that era, because it wasn't meant as a memorial. At least, not in the way you think," Clara replied, her eyes never leaving the image. "It was meant as evidence." Emily and Dr. Harlow exchanged puzzled glances. "Evidence of what?" Emily asked gently. Clara sighed, the weight of family history heavy in her voice. The Thorntons were prominent in Springfield manufacturing. When Elizabeth fell ill with diphtheria in 1884, her father Thomas was involved. In a bitter business dispute with his brother, James, there was a fortune at stake, and the terms of their father's will stated that if Thomas had no living heirs by his 40th birthday, everything would go to James. Clara's eyes glistened. Thomas turned 40 on May 20th, 1884. Elizabeth, his only child, died on May 16th. The archivist's office at the Boston Historical Society was unusually quiet the next morning as Emily spread out the documents Clara had provided. Old letters, newspaper clippings from 1884, and a small leather diary belonging to Catherine Thornton, Elizabeth's mother. Listen to this, Emily said, carefully turning the diary's brittle pages. May 16th, our angel has left us. T is inconsolable, but insists we must protect her legacy. He has arranged for Mr. Simmons to come tomorrow. God forgive us for what we must do. Dr. Harlow paced the room. Frederick Simmons was one of Boston's premier photographers in the 1880s, known for his work with elite families. His studio would have had the elaborate backdrops and props we see in the photograph. Emily continued reading. May 17, the most terrible day. Mr. S. arrived with his equipment. 4 hours of unspeakable arrangement while our darling lay before us. T insists the date on all documents must appear as the 22nd. Clara's explanation from yesterday suddenly made horrifying sense. Thomas Thornton, desperate to secure his daughter's inheritance before his 40th birthday deadline, had commissioned an elaborate post-mortem photograph designed to make Elizabeth appear alive. The plan was to present this as evidence that she had survived past his birthday on May 20th. The wooden horse, Emily realized. It was Elizabeth's favorite toy. Catherine included it as a private act of honesty amid the deception. Dr. Harlow examined a newspaper clipping announcing the tragic passing of Elizabeth Thornton on May 23, 1884, after a lengthy illness. Another article detailed the contentious dispute between the Thornton brothers that was amicably resolved. Following the tragic events within the family, they created an illusion of life, Dr. Harlow said quietly, all to fulfill the terms of a will. No, Emily corrected, to protect what a father believed was rightfully his daughter's inheritance. The Massachusetts Historical Photography Archive occupied the third floor of a renovated textile mill in Cambridge. As specialists in 19th century photography, Emily and Dr. Harlow had arranged an appointment to review Frederick Simmons's business records. His appointment, books and financial ledgers, were donated by his granddaughter in the 1950s, explained Diane Chen, the archive's curator. She placed several bound volumes on the research table. Simmons kept meticulous records. If he photographed the Thornton family, it will be documented. Emily carefully turned the pages of the 1884 appointment book, scanning entries until she found what they were looking for. May 17th, Thornton residence, Springfield. Special arrangement, full equipment required. Fee, $100. The extraordinary sum, equivalent to several months' wages for an average worker, underscored the desperation behind the commission. More revealing was Simmons' private notebook, where he recorded technical details of significant photographs. The entry for May 17th contained a disturbing note. Most difficult subject to date. Father insistent on lifelike appearance despite condition. Mother distraught, used wireframe supports and painted eyes post-production. Ethical concerns noted, but fee substantial. Dr. Harlow's expression darkened. He knew exactly what Thomas Thornton intended to do with this photograph. Emily nodded. The question is, did it work? Did Thomas succeed in claiming his daughter's inheritance? Diane pulled another volume from the archives, a collection of Springfield business records. The Thornton Manufacturing Company continued under Thomas's sole ownership until his death in 1897. His brother James left Springfield in late 1884, reportedly after a settlement. So the deception worked, Dr. Harlow concluded. Not necessarily, Emily said, studying Simmons' notes more carefully. Look at this last line. Brother arrived during session. Witnessed process. No further communication from family. The implications were clear. James Thornton had discovered the desperate charade, but for reasons unknown, had apparently chosen not to expose it. The Springfield Public Library's archives yielded an unexpected treasure, the personal correspondence of James Thornton, preserved among the records of prominent local businesses. As Emily and Dr. Harlow carefully examined the letters, a different perspective on the family drama emerged. This changes everything, Emily said, reading a letter James had written to his wife on May 18, 1884. But I went to Thomas's house to offer condolences, despite our differences. What I witnessed there has shaken me to my core. My brother, wild with grief, was directing a photographer to pose Elizabeth as though still alive. Catherine sat silently weeping in the corner, clutching a wooden horse. When Thomas saw me, he didn't show shame or guilt, only the raw desperation of a father who had lost everything. He said, "Would you take from her even in death what was meant to be hers in life?" On I left without a word, knowing what I must do. A subsequent letter revealed that James had voluntarily relinquished his claim on the inheritance, writing, "Some victories bring no honor. Let Thomas have the company. I cannot build my future on the back of their tragedy." Dr. Harlow sat back, visibly moved. So it wasn't the photograph that secured the inheritance. It was James's compassion. Emily nodded, sorting through additional documents. The legal transfer was completed on May 19th, the day before Thomas turned 40. James moved to Chicago and started a new business. But why maintain the fiction of Elizabeth dying later? Dr. Harlow wondered. The answer came in Catherine's diary. May 21st. James has shown unexpected mercy. The papers are signed, but T insists we must maintain our story. The world must never know what desperate acts grief drove us to, he says. Perhaps he is right. Let Elizabeth rest with dignity, not as a pawn in men's games of fortune. The photograph, created as a desperate deception, had instead become a secret burden, a physical reminder of how grief could drive good people to unthinkable acts. Emily stood in Springfield Cemetery's oldest section, the spring sun warming the weathered gravestones. Beside her, Clara Wilson pointed to a small angel statue marking Elizabeth Thornton's final resting place. The inscription read simply, Elizabeth, beloved daughter, 1877-1884. Catherine visited this grave every Sunday until her death in 1921, Clara said. And my grandmother told me she always brought fresh flowers and a small wooden horse. Back at the Historical Society, Emily and Dr. Harlow examined Catherine's diary entries from the months following Elizabeth's death. The pages revealed a mother torn between loyalty to her husband and the weight of their deception. August 12, 1884. T has thrown himself into work, expanding the factory and rarely speaking of E, but I cannot escape her. The photograph sits in his study, a frozen moment of pretend life that mocks her true peace. Sometimes I stand before it and beg her forgiveness. September 30th, James sent a letter from Chicago. His kindness continues to humble me. He asked for nothing but a small remembrance of E. I sent her favorite book of fairy tales against T's wishes. Some bonds transcend business and pride. As autumn turned to winter, Catherine's entries grew more sparse, but increasingly focused on preserving Elizabeth's true memory. She established a children's ward at the local hospital in Elizabeth's name, donated her daughter's clothes to families in need, and planted a memorial garden with Elizabeth's favorite flowers. December 25th, our first Christmas without her. T gave me a locket with E's portrait inside. Not the staged photograph, but one taken last summer by the lake, her smile real and eyes bright with life. Perhaps he too seeks redemption. The final entry about the photograph came in March 1885. I have removed the photograph from T's study while he travels. He will be angry, but I cannot bear its presence anymore. I've hidden it where he won't think to look, wrapped with the note he may never understand. Some lies, even those born of love, are too heavy to carry forever. The Historical Society's conference room was filled with documents tracing the path of the daguerreotype after Catherine hid it in 1885. Dr. Harlow had assembled a timeline on the whiteboard, connecting the scattered pieces of information. After hiding the photograph, Catherine never mentioned it again in her diary, Emily explained to the small team of researchers who had joined the project. Thomas never references it in his correspondence either, suggesting he never found it, or chose not to acknowledge its rediscovery. Historical records showed that the Thornton house in Springfield remained in the family until 1923, when it was sold following Catherine's death 2 years prior. An inventory of household items mentioned miscellaneous photographs and personal effects, donated to various family members. Clara believes the photograph was tucked inside a family Bible given to Catherine's niece, Frances, Dr. Harlow continued. Frances moved to Boston in the 1930s, bringing the Bible, and unknowingly, the hidden daguerreotype with her. The most surprising discovery came from Frances's daughter's diary from 1952, found the strangest thing while cleaning mother's bookshelf, a beautiful old photograph hidden inside grandfather's Bible. A little girl in white, looking so peaceful. Mother seemed troubled by it, saying only that it was poor Elizabeth and that some stories are better left in the past. She asked me to put it away and not mention it again. Emily pointed to the final connection. But the photograph remained tucked away until Clara found it while settling her mother's estate last year. 3 generations kept this secret without fully understanding what they were protecting. One of the younger researchers raised her hand. But why did Clara decide to donate it now, after all this time? I asked her that, Emily replied. And she said, secrets have power only in darkness. After 140 years, Elizabeth deserves to step into the light, not as a pawn in a family dispute, but as a child who was deeply loved. The room fell silent as they contemplated the journey of the photograph, from desperate deception to protected family secret to historical artifact, each transition shaped by love, shame, and eventually a desire for truth. The Boston Museum of American History buzzed with excitement as visitors gathered for the opening of the new exhibition. Memento Mori, Victorian America's relationship with death and remembrance. At its center, carefully displayed in a temperature-controlled case, was Elizabeth Thornton's daguerreotype. Emily stood nearby watching as people approached the display. The museum had worked closely with the Historical Society to present the full context of the photograph, not as a curiosity or macabre spectacle, but as a testament to the complex emotions surrounding death, family, and inheritance in the 19th century. We debated whether to include it at all, Dr. Harlow confessed, joining Emily. Some board members worried it might seem exploitative. Clara was the one who convinced them, Emily replied. She said, Elizabeth's story isn't about death, it's about how far a family would go to protect what they believed was rightfully hers. The exhibition included portions of Catherine's diary, James's letters, and Symonds's photography notes, presenting multiple perspectives on the events of May 1884. A small wooden horse, similar to the one in the photograph, completed the display. A middle-aged woman approached Emily, her eyes damp after reading the exhibition text. My great-grandmother lost 3 children to diphtheria in the 1880s. No photographs exist of them. I always thought it strange that she couldn't speak of them, but now I understand. Some grief is too profound for words. Throughout the day, Emily observed visitors' reactions, parents holding their children closer, elderly visitors nodding in solemn understanding, students taking notes for school projects on Victorian customs or family law. That evening, after the museum closed, Clara visited the exhibition in her wheelchair, accompanied by Emily. The elderly woman sat silently before Elizabeth's photograph, then finally spoke. Catherine would be pleased, I think. The truth didn't destroy her family's legacy, it humanized it. As they turned to leave, Clara pressed something into Emily's hand, a small, worn wooden horse. Elizabeth's toy, she said simply. The original. It belongs with her now. 1 year later, Emily stood in Springfield Cemetery again, this time accompanied by Dr. Harlow and a small group of historians and descendants of both Thomas and James Thornton's families. They had gathered for a special ceremony, the culmination of their research project. The museum exhibition had traveled to 12 cities, bringing Elizabeth's story to over 200,000 visitors. Historians had published papers examining the intersection of Victorian mourning practices, inheritance law, and photography. Most significantly, distant cousins from both branches of the Thornton family had reconnected after generations of separation. For decades, the photograph represented a family divided by grief and money, Emily said, addressing the gathered group. Today, it represents a family reunited by understanding and compassion. A new plaque was unveiled beside Elizabeth's gravestone, providing context to her brief life and significant legacy. It concluded with words from Catherine's diary. May future generations remember not when or how she left us, but that she was deeply loved every day she was here. Later, as autumn leaves drifted across the cemetery, Emily sat alone by the grave, thinking about the journey that had begun with a single photograph in a donation box. The daguerreotype would soon be returned to the museum's permanent collection, but its impact would continue through the relationships it had helped restore and the conversations it had sparked about how we remember those we've lost. She placed the small wooden horse, now professionally preserved, at the base of the gravestone. The object that Catherine had included as a silent act of truth in the midst of deception had found its way back to Elizabeth, a journey 140 years in the making. As Emily walked back through the cemetery gates, she reflected on Clara's words from their last meeting. History isn't just about recording facts. It's about understanding why people made the choices they did, especially in their darkest moments. That's how we honor them, not by judging, but by remembering their humanity. Elizabeth Thornton, briefly a pawn in a family struggle, had finally become simply what she always was, a beloved child, truly at rest.